Hey Kipsters, today we'll be covering Module 4, Lesson 17. The line joining two distinct points of the graph y equals mx plus b has slope m. Take 10 seconds to make sure your paper looks like mine, and let's get started. In the previous lesson, we determined that slope was calculated by using any same 2 points on the same line. In this lesson, you're going to be shown some equations in the form y equals mx and y equals mx plus b, and they're going to generate lines, and we're going to call their slope m. Remember, we use m for the variable slope. You're going to need some graph paper to complete the exercises and problem sets below. Give me a 3 if you need graph paper. Find at least 3 solutions to the equation y equals 2x. Once you've found those solutions, graph the solutions as points on the coordinate plane. Connect the points to make a line, and find the slope of that line. Let's take this problem in some. Find at least 3 solutions to the equation y equals 2x and graph the solutions as points on the coordinate plane. Connect the points to make a line, and find the slope of the line. The first thing we need to do to find any solution to this equation is to fix our values for x. Let's fix our values for x to find 3 solutions to be 0, 1, 2. Go ahead and make sure you have a table set up in the space for problem 17 on your paper, just like I do. Once you have your table set up, click continue. Remember, the first step to solving an equation is to write that equation. Here in this space, I've written the equation y equals 2 times some variable. Then I move to step 2. I've substituted x everywhere I would see an x for my given variable of 0, 1, and 2. My third step is then to begin to compute. I want to calculate this math. I know that 2 times 0 is 0. Anything times 0 is 0. When I want to calculate when x equals 1, I know that 2 times 1 is 2. My last value, when I want to do x equals 2, what's the value of y equals 2 times 2? Yeah, when x equals 2, y equals 4. Now let's plot these points on the coordinate plane. Connect the points to make a line. Check out what that graph will look like. Make sure you go to an x of 0 and a y of 0. So our first point is going to be at the origin. When we're looking at run to the right, an x of 1 and a y of 2. Next point will be right here. And when we're looking at an x of 2 and a y of 4, our next point is going to be right here. So we're going to connect those points to make a line. Did you use your ruler to connect those points to make a line? Good. All right, so what's the slope of this line? Type your answer in the box below. Yeah, the slope of this line is at m equals 2. That means to get from this point to this point, I need to go up 2 and over 1. Same thing for me to get from this point to this point. I need to go up 2 on the y-axis and to the right 1 on the x-axis. Let's move on to exercise number 2. Find at least 3 solutions to the equation y equals 3x minus 1 and graph the solutions as points on the coordinate plane. Connect the points to make a line and find the slope of that line. In the space for exercise 2 on your paper, make sure that you've created a table similar to the table used in the last exercise. So at this time in the middle, we're going to do step 1. We're going to write the equation y equals 3 parentheses minus 1. What's step 2 of solving word problems? What's step 2 of solving any linear equation? Yeah, step 2 is to substitute the given value. So in this parenthesis, we're going to substitute the given value of 0. I'm going to move on to step 3. Step 3 is to go ahead and begin calculating or computing. So I know that when I do 3 times 0, I'm going to get 0. Why did I do 3 times 0 first and not handle the -1 first? Hopefully you said something about the order of operations or PEMDAS, okay? Multiplication and division come before addition or subtraction. So I want to make sure I handle this multiplication between that 3 and that 0. So I simplify my equation to y equals 0 minus 1. When I continue to compute, I wind up with the answer that y equals what? Yeah, I end up with the value of -1 for y. Let's move on to the values of x equal 1 and x equal 2. Make sure you work ahead to do the work, and I'm going to display the timer for 2 minutes. Scratch that. Let's do a minute and 30 seconds. Make sure during this time you're completing the middle of your equation for y equals 3 times the given variable of x minus 1. Once you've calculated your value of y, please go ahead and plot that on a coordinate plane. All right, so when we write our equation, substitute our given value of x of 1, and we evaluate the equation y equals 3x minus 1, we find out that the value of y is 2. When we do that same equation for x equals 2, we find out that we're going to need to do multiplication first. So we're going to do 3 times 6, and 6, we're then left with 6 minus 1. 6 minus 1 is then going to give us the value of 5. It's going to give us the value of 5. I'm trying to move all of this up into the view for you to see. So make sure your table looks like mine. When x is 0, y equals -1. When x is 1, y equals 2. When x is 2, y equals 5. Now we're going to take these ordered pairs and we're going to plot them on the coordinate plane. Your graph should look very similar to mine when I want to plot 0 and -1 down. Just gonna not go left to right, I'm gonna go down to -1. Return back to my origin. When I'm plotting x of 1, y of 2, I'm gonna run to the right of 1. I'm gonna go up 1, 2. Then my last point, I wanna run to the right 1, 2, and I wanna run up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I wanna connect those points to make a straight line. What's the slope of this line? And the slope of this line is m equals 3. That means to get from one point to another, what do those directions look like? Yeah, I want to move up 3 units and I want to move to the right 1 unit. Go ahead and find exercise 3. Same thing, find at least 3 solutions to the equation y equals 3x plus 1 and graph the solutions on the coordinate plane. Connect the points to make a line and find the slope of the line. I'm going to reset the timer for 1 minute. Let's see how much faster we can work these out. For the fixed of x, we want to choose 0, 1, and 2. If you want to challenge yourself, you could choose another value of x. Okay, that's our time. So we're going to write our given equation. We're going to substitute our given values of 0. And when we use PEMDAS, we're going to multiply 3 times 0. We get that 3 times 0 is going to be 0. Oh, got some different pots. So I move some things out of the way for you. All right, there we go. So we get that 3 times 0 is 0. Now we are left with a transform equation that says 0 plus 1. And that's going to leave us with the value of y equaling 1. All right, let's move on to when when x equals 1. When x equals 1, so we're going to substitute our given value of x for 1. 3 times 1 is going to give us 3. Then we're left with 3 plus 1. And 3 plus 1 is going to give us a y of 4, y of 4. All right, go ahead and type in the value of y when x equals 2. Write our equation, substitute in x of 2, get 3 times 2 is 6, and our equation is transformed into 6 plus 1. 6 plus 1 gives us a y of 7. Now we're being asked to plot these ordered pairs on a coordinate plane and to connect those points to make a line. Great, you've connected those points to make a line. Your line should look very similar to mine. Based on the direction of this line, what type of slope should this line have and why? Great, this should have a positive slope because this is left to right inclining. So that's going to leave our slope to be what in this equation? Slope equals 3. Well, how is that possible that the slope of a positive uh, inclining I'm sorry, how is it possible that the slope of y equals 3x plus 1 and the slope of y equals 3x minus 1 have, of the equation 3x minus 1, have the exact same slope? Let's take a look at all of the problems that we've done so far. What do you notice about the equation form y equals mx or y equals mx plus or minus b and the slope? Yeah, you should notice that the slope was the exact same thing as the coefficient that's attached to the variable x in each equation. When an equation is in the form y equals mx plus b, the slope m is easily identifiable compared to an equation in the form ax plus by equals c. So again, when we're looking at equations in the form y equals mx plus b, it's easy to say that m is our slope. This is called slope-intercept form, and we'll talk about what the intercept is in this equation. But another form we'll talk about throughout this module is standard form. And standard form looks like ax plus by equals c. Something to note in both of these equations, the b in them are different numbers. What we're about to practice doing for the rest of this lesson is taking equations from this form, standard form, and turning them into slope-intercept form. Go ahead and find exercises 4 and 5. I'm going to set the timer for 1 minute. Answer the questions below. The graph of the equation y equals 7x minus 3 has what slope? The graph of the equation y equals negative 3 over 4x minus 3 has what slope? If you need to, take the last 30 seconds to look back at the previous problems, see how we slope of y. Great, that's our time. So you should have that the slope of number 4 is going to, let's make this a little bigger. It's going to be 7. I know the slope is 7 because 7 is the coefficient attached to variable x, so it's easily identifiable in this form. When we're looking at number 5, the slope of the equation is negative 3 over 4. Make sure you bring that negative with the fraction because remember operations and or signage of numbers are in front of the number. Well, there's some other ways in which we can talk about slope and identify slope. And of course, we have to bring in those handy dandy word problems. So let's go ahead and look at number 6. Number 6 says you have $20 in savings at the bank. Each week you add $2 to your savings. Let Y represent the total amount of money you have saved at the end of X amount of weeks. Write an equation to represent the situation and identify the slope of the equation. What does that number represent? Well, when we're attacking word problems, what's the annotation tool that we use? Yeah, we use cubes. We use C to circle important numbers, U to underline the question you need to answer, B to box out any key math words, E to evaluate and eliminate unnecessary information, and then S, we want to solve and then double check our work. Go ahead and use cubes to annotate your paper. Hopefully your annotation looks a little something like mine. Should have circled $20 and $2. Those are some key numbers in the problem. Make sure you've underlined how many questions? Yeah, you've underlined 3 questions. We need to write an equation that represents the situation. We need to determine what that what the number represents. I'm sorry, we need to identify slope and then determine what that number represents. All right, so let's talk about building our equation. They tell us that y represents the total amount of money you've saved at X amount of weeks. All of the things that are actually building up our equation using words. The total amount in her savings is equal to the number of weeks she saved times the amount she saves weekly plus her savings. What does that equation look like with all of the things we've annotated? That equation looks like y equals 2 times some variable x plus 20. Second question in the problem. Identify the slope of the equation. What's the slope of the equation? Slope is going to be 2. And what's the slope going to represent in this problem? Well, because of the equation being in the form y equals mx plus b, I can easily identify slope as 2. But I can use the written form of my equation to help me identify how slope is used in this equation. In this equation, slope is actually going to be the amount saved weekly, because the thing that I didn't know was the number of weeks. Find exercise 7. A friend is training for a marathon. She can run 4 miles in 28 minutes. Assume she runs at a constant rate. Write an equation to represent the total distance, y, your friend can run in x minutes. Identify the slope of the equation, and what does that number represent? So let's go ahead and use cubes to annotate this problem. Click continue when you're done and answer a few questions about your annotation. All right, so hopefully you've circled the numbers 4 and 28. They are very important numbers. And where you see the word constant rate, hopefully you have boxed it out and written that constant rate is equal to what? Yeah, constant rate is going to be equal to our distance over our time. So backtracking to some earlier lessons in Module 4, we know when we are given the constant rate of something and we're given the variables y and x, that we want to create a proportion where we actually compare the given constant rate to our distance over time. What would our proportion look like filled in? Well, my given constant rate is 4 over 28, because constant rate is equal to distance over time, and the problem says that I can run 4 miles distance in 28 minutes time. And then that's equal to the distance over time asked in the problem, and I'm being asked to solve for total distance in x miles, so that's going to be equal to y over x. I'm actually going to go ahead and turn this proportion around just for purposes of some consistency. Throughout here, you'll be seeing that throughout this lesson, you'll be seeing that we'll always put y over x on the left equal to constant rate on the right. So we're going to use what tool to evaluate this proportion? Yeah, I'm going to cross multiply. Please go ahead and solve this problem to where it's in the form y equals. Right, so once I isolate the y on one side of the equation by itself, I'm left with y equals 4 over 28x. So I have my constant rate attached to my variable x. Can I do anything with this fraction 4 over 28? Yeah, I can simplify that. So that's going to make my transform equation be y equals 1 over 7x. Let's answer the second question of the problem. What's the slope of this equation? Yeah, the slope is going to be 1 over 7. And what does that slope represent in the context of this problem? Slope of 1 over 7 represents the rate at which your friend can run 1 mile in 7 minutes. Take a look at a last example of a word problem, number 8. 4 boxes of pencil cost $5. Write an equation that represents the total cost y for x boxes of pencil. What is the slope of the equation, and what does that number represent? Let's use cubes to annotate this problem. I need you to circle the numbers 4 and 5. I've underlined the questions, write an equation, what is the slope of the equation, and what does that number represent. And the operation I've boxed out is a little difficult to find, but it's actually that the boxes of pencil cost something. So I've actually annotated over that constant rate. It's equal to distance over time. Make sure your paper looks like mine, please. All right, so very similar to the last problem, I've gone ahead and pulled out constant rate equal to distance over time. But you'll notice we're not necessarily using the words distance and time in this problem. So I'm going to look at the first question I'm being asked, and I see that my y is actually going to instead be my distance over time. It's going to be my cost over my x price. So the given constant rate that I've been given in this problem is a cost of $5 and a price of $4. Great, so when I set up my proportion to compare, create my two variable equation, I have that 5 over 4 is equal to y over x. Go ahead and solve this proportion to where it's in terms of y equals. And answer the two remaining questions asked in the problem. Slope is 5 over 4, and slope is actually going to represent the cost of one box of pencils. If you want to go ahead and convert that improper fraction into a mixed number, that's going to be 1 and 25 hundredths, or in the context of the problem, one box of pencils cost $1.25. Exercises 9, 10, and 11 are going to be our final exercises. Let's solve the following equation for y and identify the slope of the line. So here you've been given an equation in standard form, ax minus by equals c. I've already shown step 1, write the equation down. What property of equality are we going to use to move which term on the other side of the equation? Yeah, we're going to use the subtraction property of equality to move this 9x over to the right side of the equation. So because the 9x is being added on the left, we want to subtract it from both the left and the right. That's going to transform our equation to be minus 3y equals 15 minus 9x. Remember, I want to solve in terms of y. What do I need to do to get the y by itself? Yeah, I want to divide both sides by -3. So I'm going to divide both sides by -3. And I'm going to be left with y equals on the left-hand side. Each term is going to be divided by -3. So here you'll see me spreading that out. That's 15 divided by -3 minus 9x divided by -3. Go ahead and type your simplified version of the equation below. Be sure to put your x term first. Simplified version of the equation is going to be y equals 3x minus 5. What's the slope of that line? Slope of that line is 3. Going to put 2 minutes on the clock. Please go ahead and solve equations 10 and 11. All right, so when we subtract 5x from both sides, we're going to be left with 9y equals 8 minus 5x. To isolate the variable y, we want to divide both sides by 9. Remember, each term on the right is going to be divided by 9. So our equation is going to read y equals 8 over 9 minus 5 over 9x. We want to be sure that we rearrange the equation just for some consistency to read y equals -5 over 9x plus 8 over 9. Go ahead and type the slope of the line in the box. Slope of the line is -5 over 9. And number 11. So now we just have purely variables. What term are we going to move first to begin to solve this equation for y? Yeah, I want to move my x term. So I'm actually going to move the ax term by subtracting it from both sides. My simplified version of the equation is then going to read what? Yeah, it's going to read by equals c minus ax. Then to get the y alone, I want to divide both sides by b, and I'm going to be left with y equals c divided by b minus ax divided by b. How can I rewrite this so that my x term is first? I just simply move that c over b term to the back, so it's actually going to be y equals -a over bx plus cb. Last question, what's the slope of this line? Slope is -a over b. Great job getting through that lesson with me today. The summary of what we've learned today is that the line joining two distinct points of a graph of the linear equation y equals mx plus b has an easily identifiable slope of m. Second point that we proved today is that m in the equation y equals m plus b is the number that describes slope. And if you're looking at an example of an equation like y equals -2x plus 4, the slope of that line is -2. Please go ahead and turn in your completed notes and pick up your problem set and exit ticket.